Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and there was so much going on this weekend with Magic the Gathering that I felt we should do a video and talk about just some of the drama and some of the craziness that's been going on. First, I want to start off by talking about the Pro Tour and some of the positive stuff. First off, for those of you who had a chance to see the Pro Tour, and they'll be doing replays, of course, or you can catch the videos on YouTube. Top 8 was actually very exciting. There was a good mixture of decks. It was a really good standard Pro Tour. I think Dragons of Tarkir has really ushered in a very healthy environment. Just to talk a little bit about the final, as you can see, I have up on the screen the brackets for the top 8, and the final game was between Shota Yuzoka and Martin Dang. Shota being from Japan, Martin from Denmark. Shota was playing a blue-black control deck with Dragonlord Slumgar, which he says in his profile is his favorite card, and I see why. That card did some work in Standard. If you haven't had a chance to see this deck in action, go back and watch some of the videos because it was incredible. A really fun deck if you like control, but also have this like dragon backup theme. It was just really cool deck, and until Cons of Tarkir, you just didn't really see. I don't know if you ever saw a deck quite like this, and to see it get all the way to the finals was pretty exciting. There were others like that deck out in the field. That there were also some blue-black controls that didn't run the dragons kind of side option, and at least one of those also made it into the tournament and was in the semifinals. So definitely check those out. But what's exciting, I think, about Shota is he's been a phenomenal player for a number of years, and he's only had one other Pro Tour top 8, so this is his second one. He's had a number of top 16s, though, and he's always been in the talk for possible Hall of Fame, but people, of course, wanted to see at least another top 8 from him, and he's done that. He's just played such a big role in the Japanese Magic community. I feel should get into the Hall of Fame. He's just been a phenomenal player, great role model, I think. And this may help his cause. It's gonna be very helpful if he gets another top 8. If he can get a third top 8, I think he's a shoo-in. Where he stands now, he's very close to getting in if he doesn't get in already. So he ended up being the runner-up in this Pro Tour, coming in second. So phenomenal job by him. Really awesome performance. The winner of the Pro Tour was Martin Dang, and from Denmark, and he also just a very good sportsman. Just happy to see a guy like this win. He's the second. What's interesting about this? He's the second Mox qualified player who won a Pro Tour this year. So that's kind of interesting that Magic Online Championship Series is bringing us a lot of Pro Tour winners. So that's really interesting and I think really awesome. And to see people maybe kind of starting or bolstering their career on Magic Online and then crossing over to the Pro Tour is pretty awesome. And we got to see that happen twice this year. So that was really cool. His deck was a red aggro deck and kind of what you'd expect from a red aggro deck. A little bit of burn, some really cheap casting cost, red creatures. Just came down and acted quick. And really, when you watch the finals, it could have gone either way. Like, both decks had dominating games, or they just dominated the other deck. It just happened to be Martin ended up winning in the end and just came out a little ahead. As always, draws are a factor and so on and so forth. One of the things that was kind of interesting in the first game, Shota went ahead and mulliganed down to 5 and realized that he had, I think, at least one card from his previous sideboard in his deck. He called it on himself, and then he did have to be forced to mulligan to 4 and correct that. Although his 5 hand wasn't that good anyway, he probably was still going to mulligan to 4. And he did lose that game, but just kind of a side note thing is I just can't imagine the pressure that these players have as they go into a situation like that in the feature match area in general, but especially in the finals of Pro Tour. So awesome Pro Tour. It was really great coverage. Okay, so now on to some of the maybe less positive things that happened this weekend, some of the drama that happened at the Pro Tour. And before I get into this, I just want to say off the bat, these are just my opinions on some of these things, so take it for what it's worth. It's simply my opinion. and my take on it, and doesn't mean it's the right opinion or necessarily the right thing, but just these are my thoughts, and I just wanted to share them and maybe promote some dialogue among the community. But the first one is some of the disqualifications that we saw over the course of the weekend. The first being Jeremy Dezani, and this statement from Wizards is really all the information that's been released on this, so there's not an incredible amount of detail here, but basically it says Jeremy Dezani was disqualified from Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir for misrepresenting the game state to judges. The incident occurred in round 8 when judges were called to the table by the players in the match. After an investigation, it became clear that Dezani had modified his version of the story while discussing the incident with judges. As a result, he was disqualified from the event. So here's my thoughts on this. A lot of this crept up this particular Pro Tour. As we'll see, there was at least one other incident. And I don't know if it's just players being more vigilant. I don't know if it's players getting more apt to try to bend the rules because the stakes are so high, especially the stakes of staying on the Pro Tour. Because the thing in this situation with Jeremy Dezani, he was 2-5, I believe, at the time this happened. He wasn't necessarily playing to win the Pro Tour at that point, but he was playing for pro points, which, I mean, this is the livelihood of these folks. I get to continue playing the game I love and making money at it, or I don't, basically, and you only get so many chances. So there's an extreme high amount of pressure out there. Jeremy won Pro Tour Theros not that long ago, so he's an accomplished player. He has had some controversy in the past where other pro players have accused him of going to vendors to ask what cards were being sold that weekend of the Pro Tour. So that in and of itself, I guess, isn't technically against the rules or anything, but definitely was frowned upon by a lot of his peers. So he's kind of set himself up now and kind of dug a hole for himself, I think, that right now I don't think he's being really considered a great role model for the Magic community or even among some of his peers. It's kind of sad. I hope that he learns from this situation. And again, I'm only going by 2 lines of text here. You don't know the facts right now. Did he really intentionally mislead the judges or try to? Was it a misunderstanding? I don't know. All we got is what came out from this press release, basically. But it does kind of make you think about some of the recent situations. And we had the situation over in the Star City Games Open where a player was manipulating their deck and it was caught on camera. Those type of things just keep popping up. And I think back to Magic in the 90s when I first started playing, and I'll tell you, there was a lot of shady stuff going on back in those days in the casual world as well as the competitive world. And there was this feeling back in those days that Magic was kind of a flash in the pan game, that it's going to be popular for a few years and it's going to go away and these cards aren't going to be worth anything anymore. And when stores and organizers started doing tournaments for cash prizes, people just kind of felt like, or at least some people felt like, it's going to take advantage of this game. It's a silly little game. It's going to be here for a year and gone. If I can make some cash out of it, if I have to bend some rules to get some quick cash, what's the harm? It hadn't evolved into this really almost, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say a sport, because pretty much I think it's basically a sport. It hasn't evolved into that yet in the 90s, so people didn't feel this obligation to the game or to build the game or make the game better or to help other players. It just was, this is some silly little thing I can make some money on. It fostered that environment, and I think a lot of the pros, and I think back to people like Chris Bakula, John Finkel, they kind of took a stand when it came to that level of competition and started saying to some of these other players, some of your tactics don't work anymore. This is a new day and we want this to be something that people can get behind and enjoy and that it can grow and become what it's become today. And it's kind of sad when you see, I don't want to say it's a step back, because it could just simply be people are just being more vigilant. There could be a lot of reasons why these disqualifications are happening. It could be judges have decided to come down a little bit harder, especially after some of the things we saw in the past year that where players were caught in different tournaments. So it could just simply be that. So I don't think it's a step backwards or necessarily going to kill Magic or kill the Pro Tour or anything like that, but I just found it very kind of sad and unusual, I suppose. The second disqualification I just wanted to talk about briefly. Here's the other press release, and this is, I believe it's pronounced Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong, but Stefan Speck was disqualified. Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir for manipulation of game materials. An opponent noticed Speck suspiciously handling his deck during a match, called a judge. Upon investigation, it was discovered that Speck had presented only 53 cards and had a plausible opening hand set to the side. As a result, he was disqualified. So, I mean, that's, again, all we know is what's printed here. Could be more to the story, obviously, but you just read that, like, wow, that's pretty severe and very bold deck manipulation. And this is another accomplished player. He came in second in Grand Prix Omaha. A little bit of a newer player as opposed to, say, the Jeremy Dezani, who just talked to, but still a very prominent player at this point in the game, I think. And again, that's kind of sad, scary, and I'm sure there'll be more to come on these two stories as far as long term, what's going to happen to them as far as their eligibility for competitive play and so on and so forth. But just thought that was kind of interesting and sad at the same time, and just wanted to get your thoughts on that. So the next thing I wanted to go on and talk about, again, another big controversy this weekend involved Patrick Chapin at the Pro Tour. For those of you who didn't see this, I'm going to try to quickly explain what happened and not take up too much time on the explanation and kind of just talk about my feelings on it. But Patrick Chapin, first off, Pro Tour Hall of Famer, has played the game. He debuted in Pro Tour Paris in 1997. I mean, he's played the game through the 90s, from almost the very start, if not the very start. And he's a big part of Star City Games and part of their coverage team, and really, I mean, highly respected player, awesome, Magic player, and definitely is a big part of the community, has always been. Definitely people like Patrick Chapin, they like to watch him play. He was in round 6 of the Pro Tour, and they got to time, and he was in his final turns, and he was playing a Johnny, Mentor of Heroes, and kind of bring that up so we can look at it. And he used the +1 ability. At the time, he had 2 cards in his hand. A couple turns prior, there was a Corsair Crew Fix on the board that was destroyed. So his opponent pretty much knew what those 2 cards were, or should have known what those 2 cards were, because they were revealed. He went ahead and activates Johnny's +1. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an aura, creature, or planeswalker card from among them. Put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So he goes ahead and activates that, and he's playing very fast. He's in extra turns. You can tell he's obviously nervous, as anybody would be. He's on the verge of perhaps winning the game, but at the very least, drawing the game. And he goes ahead and he grabs his card from the +1 ability. He puts it down on the table. So on the table, he's got his 2 cards face down on the table. He picks the card, puts it face down on top of the other 2 cards, and puts the others at the bottom of his library, starts to shuffle his deck. His opponent calls out and says, "Don't you have to reveal that card?" He's like, "Oh yeah," he flips that top card and shows it. At that point, I guess a judge calls mate, or judge comes over, and I watched the video. It's kind of hard to see. It didn't really look like his opponent called a judge, but the judge was there at the feature match area. So he came over and basically said, well, you didn't reveal the card. You put it into your hand because it's touching the other cards. And because of that, you can't prove that you pulled the correct card out of the Johnny +1. So because of that, you're basically drawing an extra card, and it's a game loss. He was very shaken and very upset by it, and what kind of happened at that point is where I think the controversy sort of began. And just to kind of put it in a nutshell, if you want to go back and watch it on video, but I don't know if you need to. It's very hard to watch, actually. At one point, Marshall Sutcliffe said that in this commentary, that it was kind of hard to watch, but, Patrick was very shaken up. He was trying everything to kind of explain his actions. He did say to the judge, basically, I don't agree with that. And the judge said, you can appeal to the head judge. So they brought the head judge over, who's the level 5 judge, who's really like the Pro Tour head judge you see all the time. He comes over, and he ends up talking to him for a while. The exchange goes on for probably a good 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, I'd say. At least it felt that way. So he talked through it with Patrick, and in the end, he had the same conclusion, that the card went to your hand. Now, during the exchange, Patrick was visually upset, shaken by it, and he went on to explain that, well, the card was never really in my hand. I didn't pick up my hand. I just put it on top of the other cards. And the judges explained, well, actually, that's still going to your hand, unfortunately, And then the other thing that came up is Patrick said, well, it's on tape. I mean, we're here. Everybody behind me saw it. Everybody saw it on video, saw it. I was not cheating. You can play the tape back and see. And he even said, show you my whole hand. The other player saw the other 2 cards when I had the Corsair Crew fix out, not hiding anything. And, even among all of that, the rule was still the rule. And because of the way he played it, he ended up taking the game loss. So the first part I just wanted to address was the first thing I'll say is there were some folks that felt like he should have not have been given a game loss for that. And here's my opinion on that. The rule's the rule. I think the rule is there, yes, to prevent cheating, but also to keep order and flow to the game. And I think Patrick made a mistake. I think he knew he made the mistake. It sucks because the pressure is just amazing. I can't even imagine what that pressure is like. And during that immense pressure, he slipped up one time, and he's trying to play fast is another thing he brought up. He said, I was asked to play fast in extra turns. I was trying to play fast, and I did this, so, but I think the rule is there, and you can't really change the rule. As far as going back and looking at the tape, I get it. Patrick Chapin did not cheat. He's not a cheater. And some people, in case you see this story, some people did bring up when you watch the videotape back, a few turns earlier, he played a second land. He played 2 lands in one turn. I don't believe that was cheating either. I believe that was just a mistake. And that's actually a very common thing. I've seen other pro players do that, and usually no one even notices it. You play the tape back, and sometimes someone will see it. But that's a common mistake people make. I don't think he was cheating at all. I don't think that was ever his intention to do anything wrong. But it is the rule at the end of the day. And that was the part that I almost feel like if it was me in that situation, I would have just conceded the fact that, hey, judge, is that the rule? Is there any other option here because this is the Pro Tour, because this is a feature match, because this is a special situation? Is there anything I have? And if the judge said no, and I kind of would have to accept that, say, hey, it was my mistake. I didn't reveal the card. That's the only thing I'd say that, I feel like maybe he could have done differently, just in my opinion. But there's a lot on the line. There's a lot at stake. I get the fact that he's going to argue his case, and, I don't disrespect him for that or anything. Now, having said all that, I just wanted to kind of touch on the fact that, okay, the rule's the rule. I can't, and I understand they can't give special preference to the feature match because it's on tape. That's really not the right thing to do, I don't think, and not fair. Some people have felt that, well, the feature match area is different and it is special because there's a lot more pressure, and they delay your game and they have to give you extra time at the end to make up for it, and it is different. Yeah, it is, but it isn't. I don't think you can do something like that, because what if how would the other opponent feel now at that point? So this guy really didn't follow the rules, and they said it was okay and just let the game continue because we had a tape of it. But if I wasn't in the feature match, I would have won that game. That wouldn't have been right either. So, it's a tough situation. It really is. I just want to talk about the judges real quick. I think the judges handled it very well. They're just enforcing the rules that are the rules. You can't, as a judge, you can't bend the rules. And I know the judges, especially in the past year, they've gotten together. I think they're more cohesive. They're making better decisions in step with each other, and that's awesome. So I know that will continue, and as sad as the whole situation was, no fault of the judges there. The third aspect I wanted to talk about was the commentators and the actual coverage of this situation. There were a lot of folks out there that felt that they shouldn't have showed this, that it was something that they should have just left as a private matter between Patrick and the judges, and basically cut the camera or went back to the news desk and then returned, or what have you. They just felt that they just showed it for too long, that it went on too long. And my feeling on that is, here's the thing. I think the right thing to do is show it, and here's why. I said earlier, Magic's a sport now. It's grown into a sport. And if you want to take a sport or anything seriously, you have to give your fans and your audience full disclosure of what's going on. And if you don't do that, that's when people start the conspiracy theories and people start speculating on what happened or making up stories. Having that camera there and being everyone able to see what happened allows everyone to make their own conclusions. And I think that was the right thing to do in that case. You watch a baseball game, a player has a disagreement with the umpire. Do they cut away? No, they broadcast that, they cover it because it's part of the game, it's part of the sport. And, is it hard to watch sometimes? Sure. Is it what you want to see happen as a fan? No, not necessarily. You hate to see that kind of controversy, or especially if it was a bad call, you wouldn't want to see, have to, you feel for the players in those situations. But covering it, I think, is absolutely the right thing to do. Kudos to Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering, for covering it and taking this game seriously and treating it like a sport, because let's face it, the Pro Tour and the Pro Tour coverage is a marketing campaign. This isn't ESPN covering Magic. This is Magic covering Magic. If Magic wanted to turn away from that scene and just say, this is maybe not good for business, turn the camera off, they could have, and they didn't. So kudos to them. I think they did the right thing. And again, just my opinion, but it was difficult, and it was a difficult decision, I'm sure, to make, especially for a marketing team. But it was the right one at the end of the day. And I think it really was good for the game and good for the coverage, and actually good for the people involved too, that all of it was open, it was all transparent, and there wasn't any, we cut the cameras and then shadiness must have happened, going on there. So, having said all that, the final piece I just wanted to talk about with the coverage was there was some feelings that the coverage team made it sound like Patrick was trying to mislead or trying to kind of pull one over on the judges. And I will say, watching it, there were some things said, I think, in the moment that maybe weren't as thoughtful as they could have been as they were covering it. However, I will say, in my opinion, I don't think that was the intention of the commentators. I think they're excellent commentators. I think they're trying to call the game. I think they're also trying to put their perspective into it. One of the things that was said was, Patrick played in the 90s when there was a lot of rules lawyering, and you could kind of sway a judge if you made an argument. So he's trying to, wiggle his way out, was the phrases that were used. And yeah, that doesn't come across in a positive light. I agree. They probably could have been better worded. However, I don't think there was any maliciousness or any intent to make Patrick sound like he was a cheater or a liar. It was just an observation coming from a very different time of the game. Like I said, it maybe could have been worded a little better, but I don't think there was any malicious intent there or anything like that. Judge for yourself. It's out there. He said it's not something you necessarily have to run out there and watch or anything. but you want to see it all out there and draw your own conclusions from it. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about, we talked about all that drama, was one more piece of drama that actually doesn't have to do directly with the Pro Tour, but Channel Fireball earlier in the week ran an article by Gaby Spartz, and if you haven't read it, definitely go over to the site, check it out. I'll put links to all this stuff in the description below. But this was very interesting. Her article was entitled Six Things You Can Do to Get More Women into Magic. And she is a I don't want to say relatively new. She's been playing Magic for a while now, but is starting to become more of an accomplished player. And I really hope that more good things come for her. She's going down a very good path. And this is a great article. It was an amazing article. And they also have their Magic TV show that they do weekly, which is also on YouTube. And Gabby was a guest on there with Mashi Scanlon and talked more about the article. I would definitely check that out if you have a chance. But basically, these are 6 things that can get more women involved in Magic. And when you read the article, and this is actually something Gabby also said in the video, was as you read through the article, there was actually a lot of controversy. And there's comments on here, so you can read the comments too. There's a lot of controversy about this piece, and it's very sad in a way that there was the amount of controversy that there was. And one of the things Gabby said was this article actually could have been titled How to Get More People Involved in Magic. It wasn't just about women, but she was writing it as herself from a female perspective. And some of the obstacles where she tries to get some of her female friends involved in the game, here are the obstacles that she encounters. But it could be guys as well. And I kind of have a personal story I'll tell about that in a minute. But some of the comments were very childish. They were very degrading towards women. They were very almost kind of missing the point. And one of the things that Mashi Scanlon actually brought up in the interview was, which I thought was brilliant. He said that sometimes people just like to argue and find the opposite point just to kind of bolster their own intelligence and try to show that they are so smart that they have all the answers and this is why this is wrong. And they don't even really think before they do that. And they're jumping in saying things like, well, women can have bad hygiene too. And one of the notes in the article was, guys with bad hygiene, turn people off from playing the game, which is true. And people will jump in and just say these silly, stupid comments, and they're just missing the point, just completely missing the point of the article. And here's the bottom line, in my opinion. If the game does not grow, and that includes females, but not exclusively females, if the game does not grow, the game is not going to survive. The average Magic player plays for about 7 years. Now, there's people like myself and many, many other people who play longer, obviously, but the average player plays for 7 years. If you don't renew that 7-year life cycle and get new blood and fresh blood into the game will die. Eventually, that will happen. Maybe not 7 years from now, maybe not 14 years, maybe not 21 years, but at some point, if you don't find growth and find a way to grow, and this is true of every business, every single merchandise item, every single, I was in the hospitality industry for many years. If you can't get more people to join, to go to your hotel, to go to your resort, if you don't get new people to come, you can't rely just on returning customers. People will return, but it's not going to be enough for you to keep your business. And same thing for Magic the Gathering. We need to take those steps. And us as a community, we love the game. We all need to look at ourselves and think about, are we doing everything we can to promote new players to joining the game, teaching new players, treating people with respect when they come to Friday Night Magic, treating people with respect to tournaments. And that's really what the article was about. It was a really fantastic article. And I'm just going to kind of leave with a personal story of myself that kind of, I think, ties into this. I played Magic in a number of different areas in my lifetime, but I lived in the Central Florida area for many, many years. And I had a lot of great experiences playing at different local game stores over there, even, and different tournaments done by even different organizers. And for the most part, it was very positive. Now, my wife plays with me as well, and my wife was never super thrilled about going to a pre-release. Like, we would go, and sometimes she'd have fun, sometimes she wouldn't. And her biggest complaint was that she'd play in this pre-release. It was really supposed to be a casual, fun tournament, and she'd come up against, somebody who took the game very seriously. That was her biggest, I guess, fear slash complaint. She would have a good time if she played people who are just there to have fun or just having fun, and she gets it. If she makes a mistake and loses the game, she loses the game. She's not upset about that. She just doesn't like being made to feel stupid. And again, without mentioning any names, there was a player who actually was a Grand Prix winner who would play occasionally in these events. And he came across towards her as just very condescending. Not just to pick on one individual, he obviously wasn't the only one. That's why she wasn't super thrilled about going to a pre-release. She would go with me, and she kind of wanted me to go, so she'd go with me. And sometimes she did have a good time. It just depended. But for the most part, the stores themselves and the organizers themselves really ran a tight ship. They were very aggressive about keeping things moving. They had a code of conduct. They would enforce codes of conduct. And for the most part, 99% of the time, at the end, she had a good time, even though those one or two incidences really stuck out in her mind, which always made her kind of weary to go. Fast forward a little bit, we went to GP Orlando this past year, and my wife had the best time in the world. She loved it. She said she would do this all the time. And Star City Games ran that GP, and they did an amazing job. Star City just blew me away because I wasn't so sure either about going to such a big event. It was the first time I ever went to a large event like that, or anywhere near that size. I mean, thousands of people. And I was really worried about organization. I was really worried about, what I was going to find when I got there. But it was incredible. And, just the organization was great. All the players I played against and talked to were really great and supportive. There was a good amount of females playing, more than I've ever seen before, which was really awesome. But the environment was just so structured and so controlled and so well done, and the players there were just so supportive and awesome. That I wish every experience of Magic could be like that. Not that long ago, I moved back up to upstate New York, where I actually grew up, and there's local game stores that I've gone to for a long time up here. I mean, a lot of them have closed from when I started playing Magic in the 90s up here, and now there's still some local game stores. And we went to a pre-release a few months back, and we got there, and I don't know if maybe I just had such a good experience at the GP that maybe some of the flaws were magnified. But I went to a place, and again, not mentioning names or anything. My wife and I went to this place, and we sat down. It was an environment where there was a lot of new players there who were unsure and kind of nervous, and you could tell that. But there were also these, I don't know if you want to call it a clique of people who probably always play at the game store. A lot of them I've known for just playing for years, because even when I lived in Florida, I came up here to visit family and stuff, and I would play in the game store with my friends. So I knew a lot of these guys. I knew they were coming back years, year after year after year. Not necessarily bad people or anything, but clicky, and the way some of them carried on, I compared it to like being in a high school locker room. I mean, they were kind of swearing and cussing and picking on each other and just being very aggressive, and your opinion, that's stupid, and this is stupid, and it was just a very negative environment. And we kind of sat there and we got our product and we built our decks, and tell my wife was just she wanted to stay and she wanted me to play and stuff, but I just said, I get out of here. It was just that bad. And I blame the game store, quite honestly, because I get the fact that these folks are probably customers, but at the same time, you're losing customers. You're losing anyone that walks in the game store and kind of hears and sees this going on. I wouldn't want to bring my kids in there. My final note would be message to local game stores. have a code of conduct, enforce it, sit down with people. One of the things that Mashi Scanlon talked about again on the last episode of Magic TV for Channel Fireball, he talked about the hygiene issue and how they had to sit down and talk to some of their customers in the store, and it worked. It was okay. They took their advice, came back a couple days later, and they were fine, and they never had an issue again. It's not an easy conversation to have sometimes, but that code of conduct. I mean, sitting back there swearing in the store, and there was a judge there, and the judge didn't really approach it. And there were other, store workers there. Nobody really approached it. Just because, and it was a sizable store, so I mean, it's not like anyone walking through the store might have heard everything, but at the same time, someone's got to be, watching that stuff for their own business. I mean, not, aside from just Magic the Gathering and Magic being great, just for their own business, they're going to not do well if they have an environment like that. So, anyway, that's that. Again, just my opinions. Feel free to leave comments whether you disagree or agree. Like I said, this isn't something I'm going to regularly do weekly or anything like that, but I mean, if there's some things that come up that I want to talk about, I do want to kind of give my opinion on them. So, hey, thanks for listening. As always, have a great day.